Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Joint Community Council meeting. This is something we try to do every year, and this is specifically for Poplar Grove Community Council and Glendale Community Council. And I am the chair for Poplar Grove Community Council, and we have our representative here, Paulo Aguilera, who is representing Glendale Community Council. And to my right over here, we have Mayor Mendenhall, who is wonderful and here to answer your questions. And also we have to our left, our city council member and our representative, Alejandro. He's also here to answer your questions and have a discussion about, our city and our neighborhoods. Before we get started, Mayor Mendenhall will take about 5 minutes to talk to the audience, to address the audience, and our city council member will also take about 5 minutes to address the audience. However, I'm going to pass the mic over to Paulo, who will share our meeting decorum with everyone.
Thank you. I usually don't speak into microphones, so this is kind of, let's get these show things. A couple ground rules. In order for this to be a productive meeting, let's ensure that our cell phones are silent or put it on at least vibrate, so we can keep it on time. And also a couple additional rules. Let's establish this as a safe environment. Let's keep an open mind as we talk about whatever opinions and questions that we have. And I'm scooting over apparently. Be honest with your questions, but keep them brief. Like I said, we want to keep a very respectful environment here as we potentially discuss some controversial topics, but it's not a debate, it's a community forum, so let's keep it as such. And with that,
And Priscilla, could you raise your hand for a sec?
Yep.
Second microphone, if you're in the audience and you'd like to ask a question, do you mind raising your hand and Priscilla will bring a mic to you.
I'm going to stand up because it feels better to see your faces. Hi, I'm so happy to be here with you. I know many of you, and some of you I know from you coming to community council meetings and sharing your public comments, but happy to be here, happy to be back face to face. And I want to thank Sean and Sorensen Community Center staff.
Welcome.
Thanks, Sean.
Fitness, community access, gyms, everything's starting to open back up.
He was just in the hallway saying how much he loves that people are coming back, and please, please, please come back and use your center. This is your center. This is our place. And happy to be here with Councilmember Pui, and thank you, Esther and Paulo, for organizing this Glendale Poplar Grove Community Council. It's a cool thing to do this. And Representative Angela Romero, resident, and happens to also be a longtime city employee. Thank you for being here in whatever capacity, whichever hat you're wearing. For those of you who I have not met personally, perhaps we'll get to do that tonight, but I'll give you a little brief rundown. I'm Erin. I live in East Liberty Park, Elko is what it's called, East Liberty Park Community Council, and I've been on this, I was on the City Council 6 years, and representing District 5, and I've been able to be the mayor since January of 2020, and then I don't have to tell you what happened, but I haven't seen your faces in a little while. It's been a little bit of a separation of the commonality of coming together, and I want to tell you right off the top that this job is the most delightful, struggling, wonderful gift I've ever been given after my children. I love working for you, and I love looking at challenges and even crises and seeing opportunity because of the people that I work with, like Kristen Riker, who runs our Parks and Open Lands Department in the city, and Chief Brown, who never walks away from a conversation, however difficult it might be. And most of all, you as the community who put together your hearts and your passion for building a better place to live. And you show up to meetings like this, you are volunteers on our boards and commissions, you give public comment, and most of all, you stay in the discourse with us. We're a capital city We're the fastest growing state in the nation. They say we have the strongest economy in the nation as a state. And in reality, about half of our city is not intrinsically connected to the growth that is happening here. And so it can feel like it's happening to us and not with us or for us. And I see that as our job and our role as your city government, to make the connections that undo what has been built from the beginning to be separated and distanced by rail and freeway infrastructure, but also come on in, Dan Potts, there's plenty of seats right up front. There's plenty of other separations that are less tangible, that you can't just point to on a map and say it's exactly that. But Councilmember Corey, and I talk often about the needs that he represents so well in the city council on your behalf. And I want you to know that he does a really good job for you and that he stays in the conversation. So one of the promises I continue to make to you that I made in 2019 before I was elected in this role is that I'm never going to walk away from a hard situation if the city has something at stake. And whether that's the in the port situation or homeless services that we are underfunded and understaffed and also in need of much more partnership on with our state partners. We have pretty awesome county partners. Or it's a housing issue and we're talking about where affordable housing happens in the city and where it doesn't happen in the city. We have to stay in the conversation together. So I hope tonight, I think we're going to talk about some of those issues. I know that Ava has the results of some community surveys. We really love it when you take a second on your phone to hop on and fill out a questionnaire. It helps direct us, not only in meetings like this, but as we go through the day-to-day managing of the city. So I'll hand it over to my friend, Councilmember Poole.
I am not as good as the mayor to speak in public, so forgive me for that. I'm Alejandro. I serve on the city council since January, so I'm very green at this. For those that don't know me, I am an immigrant from Argentina. I serve on this council seat, and I'm honored to serve where I am right now. And I've been putting my passion into the issues of the district. I answer almost every phone call that I get. If not, I call you back, I text you back, I email you back. Because one of my most important frustrations is that the Westside deserves a strong voice, and a strong voice that I can advocate for those issues in City Hall. And we might not agree on all the issues, but if I will translate some of those issues and advocate for them and move the needle, and sometimes I don't agree with the issues personally, but it convinces me and it makes me wonder. It moves the needle on myself and listening to different views. And today you actually had the opportunity to meet the author of Arthur Brooks, who came to town, and he's been talking a lot about the civil discourse in the nation and about how we just cannot get together, and we sometimes call each other names, and because we disagree on political things. Something important about the West Side is that we are in unity in most things. We care about this community about most things. We care about each other, and I actually would argue that in this district cares about each other more than other districts in the city, because we sort of know each other. I think there is something diverse and something unique about our community that makes us special. And it feels like home for me, and it is my home. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the things that I've been working, and I hope that we can touch on those, but move the needle on infrastructure money for the city, advocating for the issues that you brought up, regardless homelessness. Every time that someone calls me on that, or I connected with services, we funded more services for the police to react to some of the issues that we're seeing. I mean, North Glendale is a big concern right now, but there are other pockets of this. the possibility of moving a precinct to North Temple, but also balancing all the issues here. You know, we cannot go too far in any direction. We deserve safety, but we also deserve to treat those that are struggling with dignity and compassion. Also, like the mayor mentioned, the issue of funding. It feels like those experiencing homelessness, and this issue falls on the city, it falls on municipalities. And this is not a municipal function, but it is our residents who complain and struggle with this issue. And it is very hard for the municipality to respond to this because we are not equipped or funded to do this. There is the mental health aspect, who's supposed to be the county. There is the substance abuse issue, also the county, but the state and the nation. And every place I travel, any major city in the country is struggling with this and balancing this struggle. So I pride myself in bringing people together. I don't know if I have brought everybody together. I'm sure I have not. But let me tell you this, that in closed doors, I'm trying to build the bridges. I'm trying to push for the West Side every time I can. And you know, if there was other council members here, we'll probably tell you a little more about this. But every time I'm in a meeting, I'm working for the West Side, and I am proud of having this opportunity. So thank you so much. Who's this? I'm holding. Okay.
So, this is the portion where we're going to have our Q&A. So if you have questions, Priscilla, just go over there. Just raise your hand and we'll give you a mic. And Ava is also going to read some questions for us.
And if you feel like there's just a topic, even, if you want us to go further on homelessness and what's happening, actually there's a lot happening on it, you can just do a topic.
So I guess since we're on the subject of homelessness, I will start it. So I moved here maybe about a year ago. On this side, I used to live over in Green Wells as well. I lived there for about 7 years. Bought a house here, you know, a little over a year and a half ago. While you say we're understaffed and underserved and whatnot, and, you know, compassionate and everything else, we are a very pretty compassionate community. Unfortunately, we don't really have, I don't see, our esteemed men in blue sort of patrolling these streets. I literally live on 100 West, and I have constant day in and day out homelessness, substance abuse, all day, every day, nonstop, right? This is starting from, if you get to the train tracks, all the way west. There's encampments, my neighbors have homeless people living in their backyard, and I can call the police, they won't ever come down my driveway that is basically a community, it's an easement, it's shared. They refuse to do anything about it. I can bring up videos, I can bring up pictures, and I get constantly ignored. So I don't really see it as a means of being underfunded, rather just like apathy. So.
What's your name?
It's Ricardo.
Yes. Ricardo, thanks. Thank you for starting us off, and I'll take a first step into it. So I'm going to try to answer it. You brought up a couple of things that I can address, and I'm going to start with your neighbor's backyard. PD actually aren't the ones to do that. It would be civil enforcement and Ava Lopez, who's have you talked to civil enforcement?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Civil enforcement officer doesn't
Okay, we need to know that, and you can always reach out to our office. Ava Lopez is I'm not going to say 7 days a week, but she's there for those kind of communications.
And we sorry for ranting out, but I found the health department, and they told me, you know what you got yourself into when you bought a house on this side.
Well, that's not
drive over
appropriate.
$120 to come like service to you. I'm just like, well, excuse me.
I can't speak for the county and the health department, but that's not cool. And so we do need to hear from you. And I know Chief Brown, if you have an experience with a police officer that feels or is dismissive, or refuses to address something that's happening, and you want to know why, we need to hear from you about that. And so that's what actually Ava, as the liaison for this district, on behalf of my office and Chief Brown and every other department in the city, except for the city council, because we are separate branches of government, I want to hear from you when that happens, okay? I want to know an address, I want to know which employee came out, I want to know the date that it happened, I want to know how many times. Okay, I don't know I don't know the rest of the circumstances or maybe what may happen next week, but let's step to the staffing and the funding part of things. We know with the zooming out, there's about 400 people who've been counted in Salt Lake County as a whole this year who don't fit into the homeless services system. So if every bed is filled at the homeless resource centers, motel vouchers are used, if there's overflow during the winter time, there's still about, well, actually not overflow during the winter time, but today, St. Vincent de Paul is the only overflow open at the moment, and it has under 70 cots available. So there's about 400 people who don't fit in the system in the county as a whole. But when we zoom out and look at the homeless services system, Andrew Johnson, where are you at? Is it 60,000 people a year touch homeless services system?
About 6,000.
6,000, thank you. 6,000 statewide?
No, just in our resource
That's
centers.
what I thought. Okay, so Salt Lake County's resource centers have about 6,000 unique individuals, not people coming in and out and being counted multiple times. And approximately 70% of those individuals who come through the services system resolve into housing and are not currently engaged in the system. You know what I mean? They get back on their feet, they get that help stabilizing and housing, and they are not in the system anymore. So for the majority of people who come through homeless services in the county, it's working really well, but it's not big enough and there's not enough space. So then there becomes constitutional issues about forcing people to move if there actually isn't a bed or a place for them to go to. And that's where our conversations with the state are really important, and the county is a good advocate with us that, the capital can be really mad at Salt Lake City all they want about why are you allowing homeless people to be on your streets in your city. And any city's response to the state could and should be, because we don't run homeless resource centers and all of them are full. They're at 97% capacity on any given night. And so this has to be a bigger conversation than Salt Lake City alone. As Ale mentioned, behavioral and mental health dollars don't come to the city, they go to the county, who administers that kind of programming. And some of the most in need and impactful in terms of quality of life in a community people have the most complex needs that really, in most cases, need mental health services, behavioral health services. And we know as a state, the Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, who administers that funding to help individuals that need it, is a 4,000 person wait list. So that so one of the people in your backyard who we might see when we leave here tonight, who is has a complexity of needs, is very unlikely to see resolution through a 4,000 person wait list, and may not even be able to go into homeless resource center and scale into housing. They need much more intensive services. So what we deal with, and then our sister city of Ogden and St. George are basically collection points where other cities surrounding us, you've heard me say this probably, that I've had mayors and council people from all over the state, Wasatch back, Salt Lake County, look me in the eye and say, if we have somebody who's homeless, we put them in the back of the cop car and drop them off in Salt Lake, because that's where the services are. Well, Salt Lake City, nor Ogden or St. George can shoulder a statewide housing, humanitarian homelessness crisis. And I think that Wayne Niederhauser, who the governor they created a new position, which Wayne has been in for, 18 months or so. He's the Utah homeless coordinator, is doing a really good job of bringing a more responsible conversation from the state level around what the actual needs are, and that this umbrella that has been all too convenient for both legislators and at times some of us to say, that person who's yelling at a tree and then cursing at me when I walk by is homelessness. They're actually a really small piece of the population. And I say that not to be diminutive about it, but that Salt Lake, back to that 400 number, Salt Lake County with 400 people who don't fit in the system right now from a beds perspective, that is not a big number of people for a state to deal with. In Los Angeles, we heard this morning, 62,000 people who don't fit into the system in Los Angeles. Our cities of Portland and Seattle are pushing 15,000 each. Denver's around 10,000 at this point. They may be closer to 12,000. We have 400 people. Come on, fastest growing state and strongest economy. The Utah way, we solve problems, we come together. We can do this. I'm not saying homelessness is gonna be resolved and everybody's gonna say yes to a tiny home or a shelter bed or a permanent supportive housing unit. That's not reality. But we can make enough beds, and we can have the capacity to say, this place is not fit for human habitation, and you can go to the resource center. Here's your options. And we need to have those options, so that, I hope, I know it's all over the map, but the reality is, it's a complex problem because there's complex individual needs that aren't being met and served very well. And yet, the state and the county and the city are working. Sorry?
Not very complex, they're all on the east side, just a shuttle over to the west side. That's consistent. I lived on that at night. I never had a homeless problem. There was one gentleman.
But what our options are at the city level and legally are not straightforward. Well, we cannot move people. I'm not going to engage in a tit for tat with you, Ricardo, but we can keep the conversation going after this if you'd like to. And Andrew Johnston, who runs homeless policy and outreach for my office, is really good at this part because he's been doing it for 20 years. Ale?
Yes, so I wanted to acknowledge the point on the police because I think that is something that I've seen a lot, and I live by North Temple, so like, you know, I mean, what you see, I see probably 10 times every day. And not to make it worse or better, I mean, none of these are appropriate. I think that there is something that to be said about the drug problem that we have in this city, and that most of the people that are buying drugs are homed and they're driving to the west side to buy these drugs. And I get so frustrated with this when I'm driving by North Temple and I see these nice cars stopping by, doing the exchange and leaving. We have a problem. And many of them live in the east side, and I would say probably lots of them live in the east side and just come to buy their drugs here. And that is something that, you know, is a big issue. We need to figure it out. I'm not sure what the solution is. But let me say this though, on what to do with a person on the streets, and what sometimes the police have told me is the person is a person that is, you know, just not completely there for whatever reason, should we send it to jail, right? Is that the question? And is the jail, I mean, we don't control the jail, right? It's the county, you know, the sheriff's department under the Rose City right now. But the jail will refuse those cases because most likely it's in an appropriate place. They cannot treat them. They don't know, they don't have the capacity to do that. So officers will sometimes be discouraged from taking a person there because they don't know what to do with it. The county, with the University of Utah, the health department came up with the receiving center solution. And the receiving center is the solution. So a place where there is specialists and mental health experts to assess the person and to try to find a solution for that person. So that is being built, hopefully, and very soon. There was some funding issues, but the county committed to break ground next month. And it's going to be next to the jail. So there is going to be a place to take someone. I mean, I was driving on North Temple probably a few months ago and turning on my street, and there was a person that was just not aware of what was happening, and the green light was there. I was on the red light to turn, and this person just walked into traffic, and I was so powerless because I wanted to push that person away from traffic, and this person missed a car by probably inches. I mean, like what I felt, I swear I was going to see this person, you know, I was honking. I didn't know what to do. This is the issue we have sometimes with the mental health part, is sometimes the police officers feel discouraged about this, and we are working very hard on this, and we've been talking to the county. I met with a few county council members that we started the conversation on this. So again, these are very complex issues. They don't seem that easy. They might seem easy, but they aren't, because there's so many layers. The county runs the jails. Then you have the justice system and the district attorney who file charges or not. Then you have the police officers. There's so many layers. The health department on top of this. So there's a lot of layers, and I'm not trying to excuse. We are working through solutions, and every time that you see something that doesn't seem right, I told you a minute ago when we were talking, is that involve me, and involve the mayor just offered the same thing. This is not an easy thing to do. And let me tell you this, I traveled to Seattle 4 or 5 times last year. I traveled to Los Angeles 3 times in the last few months, to Denver about 10 times this year, to Dallas a couple times this year. All of these cities are struggling with the same thing. This is a national crisis of substance abuse, drug addiction, which is substance abuse, mental health, also housing, the lack of affordable housing. And housing is a key here too, and the city is working very hard on trying to increase the stock and the density and allow for more affordable housing. But all of these things we need a lot of better solutions on these things. And again, most of these things are very hard to solve for a municipality with a very tight budget.
I forgot the hopeful part, which is that the complexity of the layers of government, and the health department, and the jail, and the pretrial release, and the DA's office, and the justice court, and the DHHS, who has a really long wait list. For the first time, at least in the almost 10 years I've been in City Hall, we are working together. And we're exploring models, and one model in particular that's in Miami that has been doing this for over 20 years in a way we've never done as a state, county, city, on this really complex piece of the population that has really the majority of impact on on society. We're working together, and we just funded what will be about 430 permanent supportive housing units, not more shelter beds, which we also need, but housing units. And the majority of those will be online by April 15th when the winter shelter closes. That's the biggest step forward in permanent supportive housing at one time we've ever taken, and it's because the state and the county and the city are working together. So as frustrating as it is for us as a city, I think you hear a little bit of that in our voices, we are not walking away, and we are building relationships that are resulting in 400 plus units of permanent supportive housing. That was mostly funded by the state, and then the county and the city stepped up too. So I think we're getting somewhere that we have never actually been in terms of cooperation with the state on homelessness.
Thank you. David Troster, I live here in Glendale. I think I've met you once, Mayor, in passing.
I know your name, David.
Yeah.
You write a lot of grant applications.
I'm a good
It's
emailer and pester and stuff. And this isn't, this is neighborhood specific, and I submitted the questions, so I'll just ask him while I have the chance and get a chance to answer. 2-part question. I put a CIP in 3 Creeks West roadways, and been trying to get it approved for the last 3 years. And this year, finally, the council approved it. It's an almost $1.4 million project to redo install infrastructure just across the river, a couple blocks away, put in sanitary sewers and all the other infrastructure which doesn't exist there because there's some failing septic systems. And the only option they had is either condemn the houses or hook up to the sanitary sewer, which isn't there, which is the scope of the project calls for installing it. So the question is, it was underestimated by city estimators about $850,000. Can you find that money in this year's general fund so the project doesn't get further delayed? And the second part is your Deputy Director of Public Utilities has stated, can you hear me now? Has stated that his department won't install the sanitary sewers contrary to what was approved in the scope of the project by the city council. And by yourself, you recommended it, and the Glendale Community Council has endorsed this, and all the neighbors in that neighborhood on the other side of the river. So can you find the funding, and will the city install it like the scope and approval has called for?
Is this 1050 California? No, it's
No, it's 1300 West and 10th, 1300 South and 10th West. It's across the street from your husband's park, across the river, I should say.
He'll be really flattered that you said that.
Call it 3 Creeks West.
I usually have a pretty good Rolodex of projects, but I definitely can't make an $850,000 commitment to you in this moment on that project for a number of reasons. But Ollie, do you have details on that one? And ultimately, the council holds the purse strings. So.
Yeah, so I've been following up with this, and every time you send an email, there's a lot to, there's a lot of issues there that we need to figure out, and they underestimated on the cost of it, and again, the timeline of this project was going to take a few years to actually take shape. We haven't forgotten it. We're working on it. We've been working with the administration on trying to figure out a solution for this. It is my commitment to anybody that gets a CIP application approved that we don't go back in our work. So that is what I can tell you right now is we talked, we walked that area together, and I feel very strongly about this issue because not only about the water quality of the Jordan River and the implications there, but I think that the commitment is that we shouldn't be walking away from our work. So there's a lot to untangle and figure out. So yeah, I meant to respond to this, but because I felt like you needed a response because I know your frustration. You've been working on this project for so many years, and finally it was a glimpse of light, and then all of a sudden it tanked. But we're still working on it. So yeah, thank you, David.
That's a yes eventually?
I'm committed to the project. Yeah, I'm committed to the project.
Thank you.
Hello, Ruben Carter, live in Glendale. My big concern is 1700 South, where we put some stations where they're watching, per se, what's going on across the street. But there's a white van there that's selling drugs every day. And it's been selling drugs there for probably the last 6 months, if not longer. And I'm just wondering why something isn't done about that situation, because he goes from one place to another place. And then another question I've got is pertaining to these new homes you're building, because most of the people that park on 17 South have got mobile homes. They're not going to want to go to the new homes. They've got their own little, and they know that the city won't tow them because they don't have anything to tow them with. And so they found that out, so they're just parking on the street. And I just wondered what we could do about that.
Yeah. So let me touch on the camera. That you refer to the camera, right? And I requested that camera because there was a lot of drug dealing and prostitution from the neighbors, and they were like, the neighbors couldn't walk in the park. And the city council funded extra cameras for the police for this because they're just, they help break it away. Again, it's band-aiding the issue. There is a bigger issue here to work, but we increased the camera amounts for the city significantly, and it has been effective in North Temple somewhat. We put in them when a neighbor requests them or when they're telling us about an issue like this. I requested that camera, so someone in the Glendale Community Council, someone brought that up. They were asking, what is that camera? And I listened to the meeting right after it finished because I was tied up, and I was like, I wish I could have answered that because, but again, I think there is a bigger problem. But let me just spin this about what is happening on that piece of land, which is hopefully, if the voters approve this, a regional park. And I think that is key to activate that piece of land. And I just want to say that there, and we can talk, outside the meeting about why I feel very strongly about this or not. But the mayor wanted to talk about the vehicle.
Yeah, Band-Aids only go so far, and ultimately you have to change the environment in order to have effective, lasting change. And the Glendale Regional Park would be a pretty phenomenal activation. It'll do a lot more than more patrol. But I know that there's 4 police officers on the back row who want to talk to you after this about the white van, or right now, anytime you want to, Mr. Carter. But the RVs, yeah, if you want, they want to talk to anybody too. They love a microphone. But the RVs, we do actually tow. We have a contractor who tows. Andrew, can you give us a little status on the RV tow situation? Thank you.
I'll just go up here. Yeah, so the city does work with private contractors to tow vehicles. The current statute was never envisioned for people living in the vehicle. So as it's written, it's about parking on a public right-of-way for more than 48 hours, and therefore you can get a citation on your windshield and then towed if you don't comply, right? If somebody's literally in the vehicle, a private contractor wouldn't tow it because the person's in the vehicle and they tow it back to their yard and they lock it up. There's a lot of problems inherent in that issue. So we don't have an ordinance that fits very well right now. The second piece we ran into this year actually, until a few months ago, was the contractor we had stopped doing it for various reasons. So there was a period, particularly during the summertime, where we didn't have capacity to tow. That has changed now. It doesn't change the fact that we can enforce on it, but if somebody is literally in the vehicle, we do send out, obviously parking compliance with the police department, but we also send out the outreach teams to try and work with them so that they're not in the vehicle or get them to another place. Or in some cases, we've helped with minor repairs to help them comply with the parking ordinance so they can move and leave. So a combination of all those things are happening now. But yeah, during the summertime, there was a period we didn't have the contractor to do it. But currently we do, so we do ask you to report that. We will go out and try and engage and figure out how to help resolve that situation so they will at least comply. In most cases they do. I think the white van's a different deal completely than this, obviously. But the RVs you see on 17th, particularly the ones without motors or are towed there by other people, when we have gone out and worked with them, with the health department at times, they have moved. We just can't do it quite enough, as you know. So it does build up. We go in and enforce, it builds up again, we have to enforce.
Andrew, do you mind sharing with the audience who you are?
I'm Andrew Johnston. I live about a block away from here. I've been here since '09. I'm currently working in the mayor's administration as the director of homelessness policy and outreach. Prior to that, I worked for a number of years with Volunteers of America, Utah, and on healthcare as a social worker, and then a few years on the city council representing this area until about a year and a half ago. That's right.
So he's to blame.
I take the heat of most things actually. So.
There's plenty of traps on the west side. Would it be helpful if we volunteer to tell people?
I know there are people who actually do volunteer, and that's how a lot of those fifth wheelers get moved around quite a bit. There are groups like Unsheltered Utah that do a lot of that work as well. So if you're interested, we can put you in touch directly, and they're more than happy to sort of work with you, I'm sure.
I want to encourage you. I think, Kevin, you were mostly joking, but for whatever piece of that wasn't a joke, this is part of the kind of conversation that we could be having with the state. We are, but as Utahns, I know in Salt Lakers, sometimes we feel kind of like this stuff with the state legislature when they don't really want to listen. Our representatives do, but your supermajority colleagues are harder to convince that what if there was a state-run KOA kind of a place where people could park their RVs and they could have access to shared facilities there. That's the kind of a thing that a state could take on, and our state should be having those conversations. Well, with the state, one of the troubles with the state, or what, I don't know, maybe it's not always a trouble. If they own the land, then they don't go through our zoning process. They get to do whatever they want. And just so they can show up wherever they own land and operate, sort of. Correct me, Angela, if I'm wrong here.
Yeah, you're right. But the one thing I offered, the mayor is right. I mean, I want to give the mayor and councilman employee credit, and they're dealing with people that don't want to work with us sometimes up at the legislature. But I know since the former president, Niederhauser, has taken over homeless services and is a coordinator, I know that my colleagues are starting to see things a little bit different. And so one of the things I offered to Esther at our meeting yesterday for the Poplar Community Council was to have a meeting and have Wayne come down here before the session starts to talk to you all about what we're doing when it comes to affordable housing and you know, how are we going to address with people experiencing homelessness, because I live in the neighborhood too. I walk the Jordan River Parkway, and you know, there's different individuals on the parkway, and you know, Kim and I are walking partners, and that, they're right by the parkway. And my biggest concern there is just the bend in the river. There's a group that's taken over that. They chopped down an aspen tree the other day, and so I'm just really worried about fires and really worried about, like, how do we separate people who are having mental health issues and crisis from people who are just this particular group of people, because I know different people on Parkway, and we talk to different people on Parkway. These ones are just there to like party and have a good time, and so like those are you know. So I send them to your office and to your staff because I want to make sure you all are aware of it, because I think that there's the difference there with the people that are just kind of like selling the drugs and doing things, and we're the people that really need mental health. And again, as the mayor and the councilman mentioned, the thing we don't have is beds, and so there are a lot of people who we want to help, but we don't have the staff, people that are experts to be social workers, and so we really want to make sure we're training people and the beds to provide for people. So I know that's one thing that the mayor and the councilman is working on with Wayne Niederhauser and Andrew over there, so I wanted to put that plug in for you as well.
Yeah, thanks. I want to mention, you brought up a bunch of good things, separating, you know, and there's a whole spectrum of willingness, because I don't know, I'm not a social worker as Andrew is, but the conversations I've had on those really cold January nights when we go out and engage with people who are sleeping on the street, and I've said to people time and again, if, you know, there's a room and they've got a bed for you, and if we get a van here to help you get over there, would you go? And I've had majority of people say, no, I don't want to go. And there's trauma, and there's a lot of issues in there separating those individuals from yes. But the ability to build trust enough and understanding of a person's situation partially requires not letting, I think on our part as a system, not just the city, not letting encampments get so big that those social workers can't get in and do the work. And people like our VOA and Andrew and the on-street outreach team and the rapid intervention team that we just created tell us, yeah, if there's, the larger an encampment gets, the more difficult it becomes to have people actually engage with you. So that's why we started, and the council funded the rapid intervention team this year. So the county has the authority to go into an area when it's become dangerous for the public safety, rather for public health, because of the safety risks of the things that are there. And then when they do that in Salt Lake City, or if they did it anywhere, they'd ask the city to help them with police officers who will be there to try to keep the peace and keep the workers safe, and also with equipment to remove the garbage that's left behind or whatever is left behind. And they operate based off of basically size and the public health threat of a camp. Well, as a city, we don't want to wait until, you know, the encampment is so big that the county says, all right, now we're going to go in. That's why we created the rapid intervention team. So they come in. Oh, by the way, if you don't have SLC Mobile downloaded on your phone, do it right now. Ignore me and just go onto apps, SLC Mobile, download that. It is not 911. It does not generate a police report. Don't think that. But that is what we are, that is the majority of what we are working off of, to know where people are camping, where it's not fit for human habitation, or there's you can report graffiti, you can report a downed tree, but when it comes to deploying the rapid intervention team, SLC Mobile, please use that and know that it's not a police report. Call 911 if you need that.
I think, Mayor, I think where the frustration comes from is I've been knocking on doors, is the people who are selling the drugs and are there kind of like partying down. So I go, what I've heard from many of you as I've been knocking on doors when it comes to homelessness is it's not necessarily people that are experiencing extreme trauma outside of, our kids walking to school in homeless camps, and I'm glad you all helped us with that. It's the individuals that some of us see on the parkway who are selling drugs, who are also trafficking women, I've seen this, and are partying down in the bend of the river right now is a hot spot, and just in that whole area is a hot spot. And so it's really about how do we deal with those individuals so that many of us feel safe walking to the parkway, so she's not getting called names or someone's trying to tell her that her dog's their dog. So that's I think the concern that I hear from many of the people. And so I think a lot of, it's hard to separate all those different issues. And I'll be honest with you, most of the people experiencing homelessness we'll never see because they're couch surfing, they're living in cars. So I think we're talking about a specific group of people that it just people don't feel like nothing's happening. And I know it's complicated, so that I just wanted to point that out. So that's what I hear at the doors. But I send it to your staff, and we I want to make sure that you're up to date on all of that when I'm knocking on doors and I'm hearing stuff from people.
Yes, so let me touch on that issue because we have found, because of the community meetings in North Temple, but in other parts of the district, there is a few individuals that are causing a lot of the problem. There are individuals that are being booked or they're interacting with the police sometimes and several times a day. So the police are being called to answer them several times a day. So there seems to be a hole in the system, in the justice system, and in all the layers where those individuals are not. There is not a place for them, and there is not a way of tracking who are these 20, 30, 50, maybe 100, I don't think there are that many, but they're causing the most trouble in our community. If you ask Margie and North Temple, she can name them by name, and they are there every day causing havoc. Like they're aggressive and they're just big problem. So we actually engaged with the district attorney on this issue and trying to find out how do we deal with this issue? How do we deal with these individuals that are causing the most trouble in our community? And the district attorney committed himself in public and in private to look into this. And he told me that 2 years ago. And I followed up with him again very recently because I was like, I was just like, okay, how is that happening? And 2 years ago I wasn't in the council, right? I wasn't on the city council, but I was asking very, very recently about it again because it is his jurisdiction. It's the district attorney's jurisdiction. It is not a branch of the city. How are we dealing with this issue? And he committed again that he's looking into it. So I think that's something that we need to work together as a community is you guys need to also tell us a lot about this issue. The most that we hear it, the more that we can make the case to the county, to the state about these problems. And there is a hole there. And I'm working on it. I'm trying to figure out how to untangle it. But again, it is not my jurisdiction, Mayor.
Actually, so we always want to hear from you. And you got SLC Mobile and Ava and council liaisons. But we know. Don't ever stop talking to us. But there is no convincing that needs to happen. And there's no convincing that needs to happen, I believe, with the county partners. And the transformation that we're talking about is that now we have a state office and the governor's office who also understands. We never really had that before. So keep talking, report. But you do not need to convince us. And to Sim Gill's commitment, that's what the Miami model is. So that nexus of all these cogs of government, and I think about it like a Venn diagram from the jails to the ERs to Chief Brown's patrol officers. justice court. There are about 36 individuals at any given time who are basically touching all of those entities because of their high needs and high impact. And that's who we're focusing on through the social workers that we have who are creating a more complete, not only a case history that isn't just the last time they went to jail and what those charges were, but did they have they been assessed for mental health? Were they prescribed medication? Then you can ask them if they were on it. But the real thing that needs to happen besides understanding what the complex needs are is having the ability to have the person in a reasonable enough state to make decisions about whether or not they're going to do a stiffer jail time that Sim Gill's office could decide in these few cases we're going to press for, or to access the services, be they detox, mental health, behavioral health services, whatever they may be. And I also want to make one more thing clear. The Mental Health Receiving Center that will be opening in 2 years or so after they break ground, that Councilmember Pui talked about, is not housing. But it is a place where people can show up on their own. They can be brought there by a service provider, and they will see a professional, they'll be assessed, they'll be able to get a prescription or whatever those needs are, but it is not housing. So we have to have the permanent supportive housing as the next step. And that's why this big step forward, you remember in the legislative session, they committed $55 million to affordable housing. It's the most the state's ever done in one fell swoop. Well, they said half of that, 27.5, has to go to Salt Lake County. So that's where these big permanent supportive housing units came from, 27.5. The Salt Lake County, I believe, committed $6 million to helping some of those units come online, and then our city council brought $6 million when Andrew helped work with some of those future entities and said, what do you need to get across the line? And our council stepped up to help us do that. So just being really clear with you that I know it's complicated, but we actually see the pieces in a way that we've really never had joint understanding from state to city level on what needs to happen, and most of all, the desire to do it now. We can talk about other things too, but we can talk about homelessness all night if you want.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's your name?
My name's Matt Morris. I live just 2 blocks north. So first off, I'm just glad you mentioned the Salt Lake City mobile app. I'm a big bike commuter, and I've been reporting the lights on 21st South underpass on the JRT have been burned out for 2 years, and I'd still love to see those replaced. That's not my main comment, though. We've talked a lot about affordable housing and the lack of it, or the lack thereof. There was a great Radio West a few weeks ago about affordable housing in Salt Lake or in Utah broadly, and the lack of affordable housing. And if you look around the landscape, it seems like there are 2 options. There's some amount of single-family homes that are still for sale, and there's a lot of apartment buildings being built. There's this middle ground that's not really there in terms of duplexes or other housing density. And this seems to be restricted because of the zoning in Salt Lake City. And I know Minneapolis and Portland have done away with single-family zoning, and I was just curious if Salt Lake will ever broach that topic, or if the city council has been talking about zoning as an approach to affordable housing.
I'll go first and say that I remember watching Portland do that and undo their single-family home zoning, and I don't think that politically that is something that is a next step for us, but something that the city council just did last Tuesday with a 180-day delay is approve changes to the RMF 30, not RMF 30, which is residential multifamily 30 feet height max, that allows different kinds of housing to happen there. It allows tiny homes to happen on a lot like that, or in a shared way, and a lot of other uses. The other thing that you probably read about and have heard about is the affordable housing overlay proposal that I have yet to bring to the council because we've added another layer of public feedback. When I came on the council, the first big issue that I was on the council to face was Jerry the horse. if you remember Jerry the horse, he died downtown. He pulled a carriage, and that was the first time I'd seen the community come out with the two sides with very strong feelings. And I can count probably on two hands the other issues that have brought the community out that way. And then there's the affordable housing overlay. And it hasn't even come to the council yet, and we've had like 1,500 comments come in and hours of public hearing that I think went past midnight for planning commission. So I decided that I wanted to add another layer of public feedback. Some people, is anybody in this room on this commission we put together? Maria, not you? No. I know Turner Bitten is on it on your behalf for the area, and basically we gathered housing policy people, kind of at the academic level, the developers who could possibly build these kind of things if they were approved, to talk about what's even feasible with the affordability level we put in. Advocates like Bill Tibbetts at the Crossroads Urban Center and a few others, and then neighborhood representatives. And that's the majority is the neighborhood representatives. And we've got people from all over the city. And then we hired a moderator, and he's Ted Knowlton, who works at Wasatch Front Regional Council. He's good at this. And they are taking on the 5 main areas of concern that we heard from this whole spectrum of, and I mean geographically the spectrum of the city. So they're going to get together they met this week, they'll get together I think 2 more times, and then we're going to, I think, have a much better proposal to bring to the planning commission, and then it'll make its way to the city council. I don't know what the timeline's like, but those are the ways that the city's taking on that gap, as you put it, between single family housing and high density multifamily housing. Thanks, that's a good question.
I was in a planning conference earlier this year, and learning about different types of housing and how to improve our communities. And this professor was teaching all these elected officials from all over the country about density and how affordable housing and the issues around this issue, the complexities of this issue. And he said, let's get away with affordable housing. Single-family home zones altogether is a thing happening nationally, and you guys should do it. And it went on and on and on, convincing all us about we should do it. Every single city, every single community in the country should do this. And then he said, but you're all going to lose your elections, so don't do it. And he explained this interestingly enough. He said, communities like the East Side, and I can say this, I'm not the mayor of this city, but communities like the East Side will have very strong opinions about this, more so than our communities. And they're going to rise in rows and bring the pitchforks. And I'm not afraid of that because I don't represent them. But at the same time, I also think that affordable housing and density is only happening the most in the West Side, and that needs to be spread out a little bit. And the truth is that affordable housing overlay, I'm not. We can debate this, and I would like to see the new version of this that the administration brings in, but it's not going to change significantly the East Side. There's not going to be high rises happening in the middle of Harbor Yale area. That's the afraid that they have, and it's not going to happen. But let me tell you that the city is growing, and you know this. We need more housing, and there is no way of reconciling this but allowing more density. And I know that's struggling for a lot of families and neighborhoods. And I also understand that small neighborhoods and neighborhoods that have a coherence and a personality, many of us don't want to lose that. That's why the city is taking a more careful approach on this. So we are not going to do this at the moment, but I think these steps are progressive steps to allow. On the west side we have these gigantic lots, underutilized land that many of us. I talk to a lot of neighbors that they want to downsize themselves, but they want to stay here. They want to be able to build an ADU, for example, right? And we have an ordinance for that now, and we are tweaking and improving on that. So we have other tools that we need to allow for that, for multi-generational family households that are having a lot on the west side to stay here and not get displaced also. So there's a lot of things to think about this, because by allowing a lot of new types of housing, we might be pushing families away from these families of color mostly. So that is also a big concern. So.
Funny enough, we're out of time. That went by fast.
Can we please talk about the bond? Everybody needs to vote for the bond. Really?
She's the lady.
And also, no woman has been able to answer questions. So can we ask a question?
I'd love to
Can I ask a question about it?
So what we'll do is give a few more minutes to discuss bond. I see Dan also has something to say, and Dan is sort of like our favorite in this house. I don't want to not let Dan have a time. Okay, I'm going to ask the question. Anyway, so, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to ask the question. So, we have this bond. You all need to vote for the bond. Like, the bond, like, it's like $50 on your taxes. It doesn't matter because it will, like, transform the neighborhood, and we have to vote for the bond. It's like the only way that Glendale's gonna ever, the bond for the parks bond. You all have to vote yes on the parks bond. The what?
GO bond.
The G, I don't know.
General obligation bond.
Yeah, it's the one that says parks in it. Anyway, my big question though about the bond is that, from what I understand, like we've been hearing about the park forever, for like 2 years now, which I'm like super pumped about. Everybody's excited. We're excited for the pool and stuff. The thing is, the reality is, if this bond does not pass, right now they have enough money for phase 1, which is like a parking lot and like 6 pickleball courts. Like, that's a joke. Like, it's gonna be terrible for this neighborhood if we don't get this bond passed. And my big question, though, to like the mayor is like, I feel like as a resident of Glendale, like we've been kind of like bait and switched a little bit on this park, because like I feel like it's been used by the administration and it's been used by the city to like promote how great we are for the west side and what we're gonna do for the west side. And then this, like, I didn't even know about this bond until like a month ago. I've talked to so many people throughout the city, they don't know about this bond. And it's really like unfortunate, because it does feel like for us, it's like do or die right now. And I wish that, like, I don't understand why. I understand that you can't advocate it because of this stupid legislative thing with like, you can't push any tax increases, but I just feel like this PR firm that's pushing the bond, that's supposed to be advocating for it, is like totally blowing it right now, personally. So I'm just saying, because nobody knows about it, and it's super important.
I'm glad you made your question comment. Thank you. And you're right that neither the council member nor I can advocate for the bond, but we can advocate for you voting. However you vote. Salt Lakers, there is one issue on your ballot that is just for us. This is it, the general obligation, parks, trails, and open space bond. And it's the last thing. You have to like turn it over and look hard. Please vote whichever way you vote for whatever you feel good about. And you can look at slcparksbond.com and you can see the map of what it will do. And I 100% from the bottom of my heart, this is not a bait and switch. But we haven't built a regional park in over 60 years. So 2 years is actually pretty fast that we've been doing all the community engagement to say, what would you want to see there? And then we did polling and asked citywide, would you be interested in possibly paying more for your property tax if you had better parks, trails, and open space? And about 70% of Salt Lakers said yes. And then we did it again, and they said yes again. So that's when I took it to the council. And the little bit of money that we have is, what is it, 3.5 million, Kristen, is what we already have, and this would be 27.5-ish.
Yeah.
Something, basically it'd take us to 32 million to build a brand new park. We only have Sugar House and Liberty Park for regional parks people. We need, never mind, I can't advocate. We should vote one way or another on the parks bond. And also Jordan River improvements, big Jordan River improvements. So I hope next time we're here, I know we're out of time, and they have to like, they get shut, I don't know, you gotta send your people home, so.
No, we're all fine. I was supposed to say, you can vote here at the Multicultural Center as the voting place. On
And
the
there's
8th.
some pamphlets in back there, door hangers, take some, share them with your neighbors.
No, you're
From
fine.
the League of Women's Voters to
And
remind people to vote.
I'm glad to hear, like, we want to hear if you feel like the PR campaign that the firm did is not good. Like, I'm sorry for that, if it wasn't reaching your community, but it was meant to.
And, we cannot advocate right here because it's a city-sponsored event. But as soon as I step out of this room and I take my jacket off, I can tell you how I feel about this. So I'm happy to tell you if you have questions about this and more details about
I
it.
know there's one more thing on the ballot, I just want to remind people about whether we should vote on it. It's critical. I just mentioned one thing else on the ballot, it's
Yes.
not about me.
Okay. Dan,
I can talk louder enough.
let's give Dan a moment.
So
to just,
I just want to thank Mayor Mendenhall for attending our Salt Lake County Fish and Game Association 100th anniversary. Was that a great party or what?
It was a great
Kyle
party.
showed up too. But, and also for the extra trees that we've thrown at the valley. We put some in the Fife Wetland Preserve. That was kind of cool. We put in about 300 plants there. But I want to call out yeah, this is the closest I've ever been to it. So here's the deal. We've got a crosswalk on 4th South and about 12th West where 2 children were run over and killed. And so that we put in a crosswalk there and it's like, oh my God, no, we're safe. Not so much. I've almost been struck by police officers in that crosswalk twice. That's not good. And also 2 other events where people were trying to hit me in the crosswalk. That same crosswalk, I got to quit going across that crosswalk. It's right in front of Franklin, right? And both times there were police officers there to witness the events. And I'm not sure if anything. I know the one just drove on, and the car that almost hit me hit the curb trying to miss me in a crosswalk with my dog. And so all I want to do is survive. And so here's my plea. Here's my plea. I think that if police officers aren't behaving in the manner that we want them and expect them to operate, in other words, we've all seen rolling stops at stop signs, right, by police officers and failure to use their turn signals and all that stuff. But then the rest of us operate that way too. And that's not right. And so I'm just saying that I think coming from the heart, I just want to survive.
Debbie, I know you think that's very important, but I want to point out something else on the ballot. It's on the back where you see where the Parks Bond is. And I'm not telling you how to vote, I'm just telling you, if you want to give the legislature more power, vote yes, but if you don't, vote no. And so that's the question before this bond question. So I really want everyone to look at that. Please vote on that particular thing. Do we really want to give the legislature, and I'm one of them, more power? There's a reason why we have 3 branches of government, so I just want you to think about that. So please, please, please don't skip that, that particular spot on your ballot.
So bottom line with your voting is that you should definitely turn your page over. But before we end this, and thank you all for coming, we are going to give Mayor Mendenhall and also Alejandro about 2 more minutes to sort of wrap up the conversation. I did forget to mention that we have Westside Coalition here, who is a group that's very important to us here on the West Side. It consists of all the community councils on the West Side, and they're a great voice. So Charlotte is also on that board, and I'm just going to give her a second to say a few minutes.
Well, thank you for convening this meeting. This is great, and it's really great to see so many neighbors and really the movers and shakers in our neighborhood here. But I wanted to mention that I am the 2nd vice chair of the Westside Coalition. Blake Perez is our 1st vice chair. We have several people here on the board, Dorothy and Terry. Who else am I missing? And Marissa, our secretary. Anyway, I wanted to let you know that the Westside Coalition has voted to, it's a board of 18 Westside residents, and we voted to support the general obligation bond. Is that, yeah. So, for the parks. just wanted to let you know.
Thank you very much for that. So, Mayor Mendenhall, we will start with, well, actually, Alejandro, which one of you want to start first? Alejandro?
I know we're over time. Thank you for being here tonight. We didn't get to talk about a great many things, but that's okay. We'll keep talking. And Eva Lopez, again, if you don't know Eva, she's at your community council meetings, and she's in my office representing conduit to these conversations, so please take us up on it. We didn't get to talk about 1,000 trees, but I wanted you to know yesterday we planted our 1,000th of this year, right next to Middle Elementary. Yeah, hey, but you know what? Not all the trees are living, which is something expected. I mean, about one out of 5 statistically that anybody plants new anywhere in the country doesn't make it. And we're doing a count right now. We're going to find out how many of the trees we've been planting, which right now is 3,000 Westside trees. We're going to do it every year. But I think more than that have not made it. This is about watering. And yes, council will support education dollars to let people know how to take care of your tree, and we're leaving you 5-gallon buckets. But I'm asking you to think of these trees as community trees, because they are. They're planted in public spaces. Even if it's in front of your house, if it's on the other side of the sidewalk, it's public tree. So help your neighbors out. And if you see a new tree in your neighborhood and it's suffering, please bring it a bucket of water, fill it up. They need about 2 years of support to stabilize, and then they're going to rock for you. And they're going to create clean air and shady sidewalks and all the good stuff. So help us keep the trees alive, and we're going to keep planting. Thanks for being here today.
So no one wants to hear me anymore, but just my commitment to you. Anytime that you ask me to go out, I'm happy to go walk with you, go meet with you. I've been walking the Jordan River with some of you very recently. I met with a few businesses yesterday from the district that are experiencing some of the issues. Just send me a message. I'm happy to meet. I really want to see and experience what you're seeing, so I can make a bigger case about these issues and try to find solutions. So that is my commitment to you. Thank you for being here. Download the app. Tell the administration what's going on. Thank you.
On behalf of Poplar Grove Community Council, Westside Coalition, as well as Glendale Community Council, we thank you, Mayor Mendenhall and City Councilmember Alejandro for coming out to this to our joint council meeting, and to our community. We definitely thank you all for coming out. We appreciate you. We appreciate all that you're doing. For a lot of you that are serving in the different capacities, and just know that without you all, our community wouldn't be what it is. And I know we're strong. We're a beautiful community, and I want us to keep it progressing. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart for being here tonight. Good night, everyone.